So why am I at a radio conference talking about podcasts, first of all? Well, my role at Global is all about connecting advertisers to our platforms in interesting and innovative ways. And more, that includes podcasts as part of a radio or audio campaign. Brands want to know how podcasts can work as part of an integrated campaign across multiple platforms, including radio. And I'm going to share a couple of examples with you in a minute. Commercially, we are seeing a new frontier in the way podcasts engage with advertisers, and a solid grounding in radio production, which I'm going to talk to Chris about, and commercial integration has proven absolutely invaluable, but more of that when we chat in a second. First, some stats, of course. Podcasts are absolutely huge in the UK. Almost 17 million weekly listens, with over 3/4 of 25 to 34-year-olds most likely to listen actually on a weekly basis. So you could say that podcasts are absolutely mainstream now, but they've definitely not sold out. Now, with 89% of the country listening to radio, these two mammoth audio mediums actually coexist. They actually complement each other rather than compete. And this is editorially as well as commercially. So radio offers serendipity or a sense of unplanned discovery and connection to the outside world. Radio, with that massive scale, you could say, says hi to everyone with a light touch, whereas podcasts are where you can have more of a deep and meaningful conversation. Audiences love podcasts because they're immersive. There's the chance to learn something new over a longer period of time. They're intimate, and listeners definitely feel like they get that bit closer to the personalities they love. I think when you're listening to a podcast sometimes, especially when it's a host and a guest, actually it feels like there's no one listening at all. You know, you're just part of that conversation. Now, advertisers finally are following audiences to podcasts for very similar reasons. They sometimes need that bit more time to get their message across. They're striving for authenticity, and they want to be around real voices for longer periods of time. So you could argue that brands are now joining someone else's conversation rather than trying to dictate it themselves, and they're finally kind of okay with that. Now, we've seen it especially with comedy podcasts. So comedy podcasts were definitely a big no-no to very big advertisers in the not very distant past. It was, what if the host swore, which was a real possibility? What if the conversation got a bit racy? What if there was something said that was a bit controversial? Well, actually, this isn't the case now. I think big advertisers are definitely leaning in. So we are seeing brands from every sector flocking to podcasts like Global's My Therapist Ghosted Me with Joanne McNally and Vogue Williams, or one of the biggest podcasts in the country, Parenting Hell with Josh Widdicombe and Rob Beckett. We have tons and tons of commercial clients on there now. So we're actually working really closely now with podcast hosts to find new ways to integrate advertisers into the fabric of their shows. So podcasts now have scale, they have the environment is right, and it's a perfect place for brands to have that deeper conversation. And I think this is especially important now when they might want to include their positioning or any initiatives that they're doing around things like sustainability, diversity, social responsibility, that kind of thing. Now, a good example of this, I think, is how an advertiser did this as part of a wider campaign, is something that we did very recently with giffgaff. So during Pride Month in June this year, giffgaff wanted to show their support for the LGBTQIA+ community by encouraging audiences to pick up the phone and have a proper chat and just be there for each other. We gave a platform to this community across our channels, including videos of these chats with everyone from drag queens from RuPaul's Drag Race, right through to social influence and that type of thing. And it ran across all of our channels, including radio, social video, that kind of thing. So giffgaff's activity is actually anchored in extensive partnerships in radio. So they sponsor Capital Extra's breakfast show currently, and also Capital's Drive show. And these are brilliant platforms for driving engagement and communicating key offer-led messages. But it was within podcasts that we could actually go deeper. So we matched them up with, I thought it was me. We matched them up with two podcasts. That kind of targeted the community. So this was podcasters Susie Ruffle and Lewis Bloom, and they have an incredibly close relationship with their audiences, and that allows them to engage on a really personal level. So the host-read ads that they actually did reflected this. So Susie and Lewis could offer their own suggestions or advice on topics that affected their community they could do that through giffgaff rather than just giving like a professional endorsement. So it felt very real. It's a really good example of how a podcast has a clear role while supporting hero content that actually lived primarily on radio and does a great job of it. Now, my last example is, I admit, a bit of a shameless plug because the timing is absolutely perfect. And it's something we're just about to launch from Global, where the podcast itself is actually the hero content, and the surrounding media, including radio airtime, partnerships on radio as well, are used to shout about it. And this is At Your Leisure. It's At Your Leisure. It's a 10-part podcast hosted by Sue Perkins. It's launching this week. The first 2 episodes are out next week. The trailer is out this week. And we've actually developed this in-house for Lego, all based around tapping into the pastimes and passions that people have carried through from childhood right through to adulthood. So we worked with Initiative Media to come up with the idea. We booked the host, we booked the 10 guests. This is across 10 weeks, just as we would do with radio. But the podcast is very much the hero content. Surrounding it, though, and using kind of the power of Global, we've got a huge distribution push across all of our platforms, outdoor, DAX, but essentially radio airtime, radio partnerships, guest spots on radio shows.